Mr. Speaker, I serve a big riding. I've knocked thousands of doors, and the consensus is clear. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians do not want these emissions caps choking our economy. But these emissions caps don't just affect my riding. They affect the whole world. We have allies all throughout the world who are starving for more energy. Mr. Speaker, our energy is some of the most socially inclusive oil and gas in the world, with the strictest environmental standards, and we should be supplying our allies with this energy so that we can build our economy, reduce emissions, and provide international security. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the message was clear. Europe needed to eliminate their dependence on oil and gas from Russia. Countries affected, like Germany, came to my province of Newfoundland looking for more oil and gas, specifically LNG, liquefied natural gas. Instead of this Liberal government working with Germany and our private investors, they told Germany there was no business case and tried to sell them hydrogen instead. If these Liberal governments had not axed the LNG project the last Conservative government started, Germany would have already been purchasing our resources rather than funding Russia, giving them more money and more influence in Europe to fund their wars. Wars which our taxpayers send our money to combat. It's an oxymoron. So to recap, we have emission caps, which chokes our industry, allowing for more industries to sell to more opportunities for Russia to sell their energy to fund their wars. While our taxpayer dollars lose billions in royalties, we send our taxpaying dollars to Ukraine to fight that very country. It's a lose-lose. It doesn't even begin to make sense. Why won't this Liberal government remove the emissions caps so that we can produce more for our allies to provide international security to both us and them? Mr. Speaker, believe it or not, providing the world with our oil and gas would enable us to reduce carbon emissions. We don't need to choke our economy to lower global emissions. We can actually lower global emissions by producing more and getting more Canadians back to work. Natural gas produces roughly half the emissions of coal. The Fraser Institute estimates that doubling Canadian gas production and exporting it to Asia could reduce global emissions by as much as 630 million tonnes per year. Wow. Almost 90% of Canada's total amount. Almost 90%. Let that sink in. There is also a significant carbon savings for replacing coal with traditional oil. That is why us as Conservatives are standing for it. It's a win-win. Regardless of what these Liberals fantasize about, as third world countries are rapidly developing, the global demand for energy is skyrocketing. Indeed. I was once asked a question, what year did the world burn the most amount of coal? And I pondered and I thought about it, and I figured it was probably the late 90s or late 80s. But I was shocked to learn that the answer is last year. And it's always been last year, and the answer will continue to be last year for many years in the future. And that is heartbreaking. Last year, the world consumed 90 billion tonnes of coal. So if the world really wants to eliminate coal consumption, we need to produce an additional 41 billion barrels of oil. And I think we can do it here in Canada. The reality is we cannot miss out on having an opportunity to have a better tomorrow because we're fantasizing about having a perfect tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, where should these nations turn to source this natural oil and gas? While our allies look elsewhere, Canada keeps selling almost all of its oil and gas south of the border. Natural Resources Canada confirms that 98% of our crude goes to the U.S., nearly 4 billion barrels per day, while the Canadian Energy Regulator shows almost all of our gas goes to the U.S. We even sell it at a discount compared to the U.S. benchmarks. It's rumored that for every $1 of crude that we send to the U.S., they export for $3. Talk about the markup. But it gets worse. Visiting a natural gas plant in Alberta, I found out that they are selling to a grid that could be brought down to the Americans for 5 cents a unit. Then the Americans liquefy that and sell it for over $12 a unit. Something is wrong here, Mr. Speaker, and that's why Conservatives believe Canadian energy should be cutting coal abroad instead of being sold off to the Americans for pennies on the dollar. Hear, hear. We are in a trade war with a country where Trump yells, drill, baby, drill, and oil companies are investing in the U.S. rather than here in Canada because there isn't enough room under these production caps. These Liberals claim they're trying to fight Trump, build our economy, and they're trying to do this with one arm tied behind our back. We need to build these pipelines. We need to build a nation that is able to export to other countries so that we can truly lower carbon emissions. And yet, this Liberal government was going around claiming they wanted to do that, but they refused to take the first step to eliminate the emission caps. Mr. Speaker, were they intentionally deceiving voters during their election campaign, or were they simply too stubborn to take the first step? The reality is if we as Canadians don't supply this energy, other countries will. And if there's one country in the world that will benefit from selling energy, I propose it's Canada. I propose it's Newfoundland. Newfoundland and Labrador's GDP relies on oil and gas more than any other province. Yes, even more than Alberta. Newfoundland has more offshore oil and gas undiscovered than we do discovered. Yet companies will not invest any further in exploration because of these emission caps. The Bay du Nord project, a project delayed time after time because of these Liberal failures, will be the last project offshore Newfoundland due to these emissions caps. Let me repeat that for the people at home. Bay du Nord, if it goes ahead, will be the last offshore project in Newfoundland and Labrador because of these emission caps. There is simply no more room. It's capped. And not only will it be the last project, but in 2032, the emission caps decrease, and the current offshore industry will have to cut back on production. Yes, cut back. Can our economy really take another hit when unemployment is at a all-time low and people can barely afford groceries? We as Conservatives promised to work with industry to double oil and gas in Newfoundland. That would have added an additional 25% to our provincial GDP. Imagine the roads that we could have paved. Imagine the doctors we could have hired, even in St. Lawrence. But instead, we have a Liberal government who want to leave the emission caps in place and, by effect, leave our roads and healthcare system in despair. Mr. Speaker, I've worked in the oil and gas industry, and let me tell you this. Our oil and gas is the most socially and environmentally acceptable oil in the world. In addition to having some of the strictest environmental regulations in the world, we also have the highest safety requirements, protecting workers and prioritizing the quality of life. We have some of the most inclusive oil and gas production in the world. The Canadian energy sector does not discriminate when we hire people of all races, all genders, all sexual orientations. We ensure that our oil and gas benefits everybody in this country. And without naming names, I'm not confident that all these energy-producing countries are offering the same equality that we have here in Canada.
Indeed.
Why is our allies who believe in equality, who believe in safety, and want to see strong environmental regulations keep buying dirty dictator oil? It's because this Liberal government refuses to repeal the emissions cap so that we can meet their supply. So as I stated before, we cannot miss out on our opportunity to have a better tomorrow because we're fantasizing about having a perfect tomorrow. I hope this message will move the Liberal government to work with us Conservatives to repeal these emissions caps so that we can put Canada first for change.
Here.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to Government House Leader.
You can't trust the Conservative policy. Think about this. The member is saying, and he's being critical because of the United States taking our oil and then making profit off it. Now, I was questioning the critic, and I was saying, well, you haven't built any pipelines. Stephen Harper didn't build any pipelines to the West Coast. The response, well, we built 4. Well, those 4 pipelines went to the States. Now, contrast that to the one pipeline, major pipeline, that we put into place, and that went to the West Coast. Do the member not see the hypocrisy that is there? Not to mention Bill 49, C-49. The Conservatives voted against Bill C-49, which was to the economic advantage of Atlantic Canada. Would the member not acknowledge that the leader of the Conservative Party and his seatmates were wrong to vote against C-49?
The Honourable Member for Terra Nova, the Peninsulas.
I'll acknowledge a few things. If it's not one thing on one side of the country, it's another thing on the other. They say that we can't sell our oil and gas because we can't get it to market in Alberta, but Newfoundland, you have no excuse. We're at Tidewater, yet there's emissions caps that keeps us choked. If it's not one thing, it's another. I'm tired of excuses. Canada's tired of the excuses, and the Conservative government will be working together to build this country.
Indeed.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. Le député de...
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, since the arrival of this new government, there's been competition between the Conservatives and the Liberals. They're trying to determine who is the most pro-oil and gas. Well, this festival is just ongoing because on both sides, it seems as though they want to just do away with all environmental regulations. My question for the Conservatives is the following. There are investment credits of $5.7 billion for carbon capture and storage to help the oil and gas industry. Are the Conservatives in agreement with billions of dollars handed out to an industry that is already a billionaire's industry?
For Terra Nova, the Peninsulas.
The member is saying that Conservatives and Liberals are trying to see who's the most pro-oil and gas. Every province in Canada is happy to take oil money, but not all that happy to play the oil game. Well, Mr. Speaker, you can't have oil money without playing the oil game.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a first-generation Albertan with a mother from St. John's, Newfoundland, I just want to say how happy I am to have this member join us from that great province, from Newfoundland and Labrador, as an advocate for energy workers, for resource development there right across the country. But speaking of that, given that we both know the generations of young Atlantic Canadians who have had to leave to find work in other places, and also knowing that there have been massive job losses since this Prime Minister came to office, specifically in natural resources, hundreds of thousands of job losses, in fact, year over year in May, June, and August in forestry, mining, fishing, quarrying, oil and gas. That's the reality of their record and also the future. What does he have to say to the people he represents and all Canadians about that?
The Honourable Member for Terra Nova, the Peninsulas.
Newfoundland and Labrador has some of the highest unemployment rates in the country. And next to Newfoundland and Labrador, not far behind, is Alberta. And that's because this Liberal government has brought in emissions caps and been choking our economy. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians have been traveling back and forth to Alberta and other provinces for years. And my member from Fort McMurray is in agreement because she understands, she sees that. And us as Newfoundland and Labrador, our economy is not just in our offshore industry, but also in Alberta. And when the West does better, all of Canada does better, including the East Coast, including Newfoundland. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague from Newfoundland for his amazing, impassioned speech. One of the things he so rightfully pointed out is that for the last 10 years, we've seen a government here in Ottawa telling the energy industry that it shouldn't exist, that it should transition away from something else, and that they were ashamed of it. Now they're sitting there trying to say that they're different, but they haven't really done anything different. They haven't got rid of the anti-energy laws. All they have done is created a new framework so they can bypass their own bad policies.
I have to interrupt the member to give the chance for member for Terra Nova, the Peninsulas, to respond in 20 seconds or less.
Yeah, we've got an interconnected economy, and we just want to thank Fort McMurray and Newfoundland and Labrador for all of it's done, all the work it's provided in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we look forward to working with Alberta to build the best country that we can for a change.